Welcome to On the Land for this week. We're going to be talking about a range of things, including how we're going to feed the multitudes, millions in fact, of people who are going to be appearing on this earth. We're also going to be looking at some new legislation regarding liability, and that's very, very scary. But in just a moment, it's Cropping with Dennis. As far as irrigation, you think that irrigation is the end of all and it's the golden thing, but there's pests associated?
Absolutely, Rob. Farmers need to recognise the fact that the environment they're creating with irrigation, which of course is trying to grow cover or feed on their pastures, and also making the ground nice and soft. And if you were a baby piranha caterpillar hatching, you need soft digging to get down and get away from the pests and from the potential for the sun. And also grass grub larvae need exactly the same thing, or in fact the grass grub beetle, the female, will actually burrow into the ground if it's soft enough and lay her eggs underground so that the sun doesn't get an opportunity. But so with irrigation you've got the cover from the sun with the feed you're growing and the nice soft environment. And of course, come round to this time of the year, the first frosts we get, farmers think, oh dear, the frost knocked the clover, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, the young developing grass grub have been growing and gnawing away at those roots in the bottom there, and so you've got a top and tail effect, and all of a sudden farmers say, where did all my feed go?
Exactly, yeah. down the throat of a caterpillar.
Absolutely. And the other thing is the piranha caterpillar, adult piranha caterpillar, people don't realise this, is that on a warm night they'll come to the surface and feed in quite a large area away from their hole, and 4 adult piranha caterpillar are capable of eating as much feed as 1 stock unit.
4 caterpillars?
Well, they get fairly big.
Yeah,
yes, they do. Yeah, capable of consuming that much feed.
Okay, what do you dump on their heads?
Well, you can look at all sorts of things. Diazinon, which is one of those organophosphates, should we say, which is under a bit of attack.
Just quietly mention that in passing.
You've got to look at withholding periods and stock safety, of course. Yeah. But there are insect growth regulators that are a little bit kinder to the environment, and they can be used, but they have to be used strategically when the caterpillars are increasing in size and trying to molt. And what it does is basically stops the skin from splitting and puts them in a straitjacket, and so they can't. And
they throttle themselves.
Throttle themselves. They can't expand, or they can't grow without their skin breaking away to the next stage, and so it puts them in a
nice way of putting it.
Yes.
Do people still use heavy rollers?
Yes, with mixed success. People say, well, you know, some of these things are nocturnal, so you roll at night.
Yeah, okay.
And you probably squash a few slugs and things like that. And of course, slugs are another pest that loves that moist environment that irrigation gives.
Mm. Air plans?
Yes, Environment Canterbury are looking at, they've been working on water plans, of course, and tidying up water. They're now putting their focus on to air purity. And particularly of interest to cropping farmers is our continued ability to burn off our stubble crops, and that is very, very important in terms of a management tool, in terms of an insect control tool, and also weed seed, killing weed seeds as well. So a very important aspect of farming to cropping farmers, and that's really under attack. And some of the proposed legislation is quite restrictive and quite frankly quite impractical. Some of it where you have to have the local volunteer fire brigade on standby when you have a stubble fire. Well, they're going to love that. It's just impractical. Doing a farm environment plan for each burn off rather than one for the whole farm covering water and smoke. Also, another thing that they're looking at is potentially ring fencing places like Darfield, Methven, Leaston, Lincoln, 6 Ks, because it's been deemed that smoke will travel 6 Ks. So what happens if it's blowing northwest, and what happens on the upside of that town when it's blowing northwest or southwest or what have you? And so you can't control the wind direction. We know it changes.
Yes, it does, yeah.
Yeah, so you know, one of my clients was told that he can burn as long as his smoke doesn't leave his property.
Sorry. Get back, smoke, get back.
Absolutely. And so he said, well, I can't guarantee that because this fire could go on for several days, and my boundaries from the fire are different that direction. And the lady said to him, we'll make small fires so they only last a day.
Yeah, okay, so that's going to be the next challenge. There's going to be a champion of some sort coming in to fight for you guys?
Yes, we're looking at our organisation. I've signed my name to a submission coming in. Federated Farmers are having a go. Foundation for Arable Research have done some very, very good work on stubble burning as well. So hopefully that information, ECAN already have that information and have respected that, and it is well science-based. So
you can guarantee if it's in Canterbury, it'll go everywhere else.
Yes.
It'll travel. I mean, yeah, the template will go to other regional councils.
Oh, sure. You know, we saw the Horizon Regional Council go in with this big water thing for a start, and that sent shockwaves through everybody and sort of filtered back down. And thank goodness some of that was moderated. And you know, we all have to live on this planet, and we're all looking for a greater quality of life. And but farmers are also looking for an income, and the city folk are looking for food to eat that's safe, and you can trace its safety, and at a reasonable price.
There's more about that straight after our interview, actually. But what about using insects for protein? You've been mumbling about that for a while.
Well, Rob, you know, we all know about the ruminant protein not being able to fed to herbivores and things like that, and that's fully understandable with the mad cow disease and all that sort of thing, that and foot and mouth potentials and all sorts of things there. But insects proliferate and do particularly well on this planet, and they are a huge source of protein. And you know, people eat crickets and all sorts of things, don't they? And
you never see a skinny bird either.
No. So the consumers of Europe have been asked the question about how they would feel about insect protein being used as animal feed. So protein to living protein used to produce more protein. Indeed, you know, we've all seen chickens eating worms and so forth. So put that scenario out there, and would lie some slugs and things like that. So that is insect protein. Now we, in a controlled environment, we could produce huge number of things like maggots, for instance, and they're full of protein, and in some form they could be fed to, obviously a dead form, I would think, or
one would hope so,
or a form that's about to be dead very soon when it's eaten by an animal or or a bird. So yeah, this planet really is there's a real shortage of protein, and it's quite expensive, and we need protein, and so traditional sources are becoming either scarce or hard to grow, or use too much water, all those sorts of things. So insects could be a new breakthrough in the future, as long as consumers don't get the wrong end of the stick.
Which they will.
You know, we've all heard about GM, and you grow two heads and you do all sorts of things from that, but that's miles wide of the truth, and I'm sure it can be done on the extreme sci-fi side, but certainly in reality, you know, the scientists are not that crazy.
Exactly. Well, one scientist who certainly isn't crazy is Tony Bywater, and I asked him about what we're going to do about feeding the multitudes as the human population just keeps on building.
From the average person's point of view, the biggest thing we can do is actually reduce waste. What's amazing is that we waste about half of the food we produce. It's incredible, really. So reduce waste. Only buy what you need, buy what's healthy, and eat what you've bought. Basically, that's the answer. In terms of Christchurch, there are opportunities, I think, in Christchurch from a leadership point of view rather than from a need point of view, because we've got plenty of land and water in New Zealand. We don't necessarily need to do this. But globally, it's quite clear that cities are going to have to become food producing areas. And if you think of the rainfall and sunshine that hits an average city, and we spend most of our time either trying to channel it away or trying to reflect it back again, then if you think of the energy and water that's hitting the city that could be transformed into food, there's got to be options to do that. And I'm suggesting that we look at our rooftops and see what kind of commercial, not hobby stuff, commercial food production we can do in cities on the rooftops. I think there's huge potential for that.
Cities are going to get bigger?
Absolutely, yeah. With the mega cities of the world in about 25 years' time, we're going to cover an area half the size of China. I mean, that's a big area. There's going to be lots of cities with 30, 40 million people in them. They're huge. Just the logistics of getting food into them and waste out of them is a huge problem. So again, reinforcing the idea of actually producing the food in the cities rather than bringing it in from outside. So yeah, cities are going to be huge globally, and they're going to be a huge drain in terms of food production resources.
Rooftop farming?
Rooftop farming, yeah. Probably not animals, probably fruit and vegetables, and we need to look at the range of fruit and vegetables that we produce. But I can't see any reason why we shouldn't be capturing rainfall, harnessing sunshine, and growing food on top of our buildings. Makes sense to me.
Miniature fruit trees?
Yeah, I mean, there's been work going back 20 or 30 years on fruit trees that are, you know, no bigger than a bush. The fruit itself doesn't reduce in size, it's just the tree that reduces in size. So yeah, we can have small fruit trees producing full-size fruit and plenty of it. You actually get more per hectare on small-size trees than you do on big ones.
Certainly does make a lot of sense, doesn't it? After the break, we're going to be talking to John Wally about things economic.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good.
Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
Get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
Welcome back to On the Land, and don't forget, if you do hear something on the program and you do want to double check it, or you do want to go back over it, or whatever you want to do with it, you can go onto our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. And what we've done is we've got a whole lot of different categories. Like, for example, the next guest is going to be under finance because he's got his finger on finance as far as what's happening here in New Zealand and around the world. So you click on that and you can see what John Wally has been saying. In fact, we'll be hearing from him in just a moment. Retirement with
a very small R at the moment, so I'm no longer with the manufacturers, so they've just appointed a successor, so that's good.
So they found somebody to have a go at filling your shoes.
And I'm sure they'll do very well. And so I've been out of there now for just under a month. It was supposed to be a bit of retirement, but it hasn't worked out that way, so we keep going.
So what are you doing?
Well, basically minding my own businesses at the moment, so I'm focusing much more on the things I've been involved with in the past in a governance sense, but now more in a hands-on role.
So your name is still whispered in hushed tones in Parliament?
I doubt very much. Doubt very much.
So what is happening out there, John?
Well, I mean, you would have heard the Grant Spencer speech, or heard of the Grant Spencer speech last Wednesday. Basically stirred up the problem around the Auckland housing market again. So it was that monetary policy needs mates. There's only so much the Reserve Bank can do. It's between that rock of low inflation and the hard place of rising asset prices, and doesn't really have the ability of itself to deal with everything with the tools it's got at the moment. So it's in that it has a screwdriver, it really needs a hammer sort of situation.
I mean, people keep saying about the Auckland housing market, and we're going to get more interest rates and God knows what. But is it really that strong?
Well, if you look at the average house prices to average wages, we've got one of the most overvalued markets in the world for property. And so that problem of people borrowing more and more in order to live in a house becomes a problem for the broader economy.
Is it a New Zealand thing that we have to own the house we sleep in?
Most of the English-speaking world has seen asset price inflation, and indeed that's been some of the pushback from the government, which says, John Key's asked, well, Grant Spencer's talking about capital gains tax. Mr. Key, what do you think? Oh, well, it's not really a good idea for all sorts of reasons. One of the major reactions is, well, Australia, the UK, North America's got a capital gains tax, and it's seen asset price inflation in property. So it hasn't really fixed it. It's that comparative situation. There is no doubt that investing in land and buildings in New Zealand is advantageous from the tax viewpoint. So more money goes there, which would be okay if that's all that happened. But the knock-on problem is that we see a lift in the exchange rate, and that hurts all of us who make and sell stuff offshore.
I mean, the thing as far about asset capital gains tax, Labor sort of started to mumble about it, and it fell over and quivered and died.
Well, I've been mumbling about it for a long time, and it really comes back to that balanced economy. If we incentivize the wrong things or some things in the economy, the effort tends to go there. And if that's good for the whole economy, that's fine. But if it's only that part of the economy that benefits, we have an ongoing difficulty that we develop a one-legged economy, if you like.
Because, seriously, it didn't make any traction, did it? And
no.
National just blew them out of water.
And right now, National has said we have no electoral mandate for capital gains tax, so we're not even going to talk about it. But the reality is, the deeper issues are it's distorting the economy, and one day we'll all pay for it.
Can it be made simple?
It can be absolutely simple. It can be capital gains tax on everything everywhere, no exceptions, but tends to get a little bit more complicated than that. It can be done. I mean, the people who argue it's complicated want to make it complicated because they're against it. The people who argue for it say it's simple because they're for it. But one thing's absolutely right, it takes a while to cut in. It's a future issue. So if I buy an asset today and sell it tomorrow for the same price, no tax. I sell it in 10 years' time for double the price, I'm taxed on that price increase. So that it does take time for capital gains to play through. But anticipation would alter the behaviour in the economy.
Would this mean that a lot of people are buying and selling houses and doing very well out of it and not paying tax?
Well, that means people are buying and selling houses and doing very well out of it and not paying tax, so the people who are paying tax are paying disproportionately more tax than they would otherwise do. So the load is carried elsewhere.
The dollar.
The dollar.
When's it going to come back and be realistic?
Well, that's the difficulty. The Reserve Bank, from the inflation standpoint, should be cutting the OCR. That would lower the currency. It can't cut the OCR because if it did, it puts more fire under the Auckland housing market. So it's between that, I've got a screwdriver, I need a hammer problem. And so there's discussion now about special reserve ratios influencing the banks on what they can lend on rental property, because people with 5, 6, 7 properties are vastly gearing up those properties, buying them in the Auckland market, taking the tax-free capital gain. That's lifting the price for everybody who's in the housing market.
Gearing up. That's scary.
It's very scary. Debt is a worry. Debt's a worry in the general structure of the world today. There's a lot of debt around. And I've said in the past that the debt is the things that worries me.
I mean, the 1980s, that big crash we had, that was because of people overgearing for the stock exchange.
Well, the similar things are happening around the world now in terms of equities. Things are happening in the housing market. So if borrowing is cheap and gains are there to be had, people are leveraging up to go after those gains.
Greed, John.
Well, in some cases, but it's financial behaviour, and people react to the rules that exist. So if you and I offered investment A versus investment B, and investment B is tax-free, where do we go?
Exactly. Internationally, briefly, what's
well,
happening internationally?
You know, we've got Greece, we've got Europe, we've got China, we've got lots of difficulties in the global economy. So the in and out, or Grexit, the exit from the euro for Greece is there. The Chinese are seeing their own problems. They've loosened monetary policy recently because they are seeing some lower growth than they anticipated. That's bad for New Zealand, because China's now a very, very big international customer.
And Australia, because we're almost on a parity, how the hell did that happen?
Well, that's because the world sees New Zealand as being a better bet than Australia. So we're in commodities just like the Australians are in commodities, but the Australians tend to dig a hole in the ground. China really doesn't want steel, so that's a downward pressure on Australia. Still, even though the dairy auctions are off, there's still demand for dairy powder. It's seen as soft commodities rather than hard commodities. So that difference from a distance, New Zealand is seen stronger than Australia. Whether that's true and whether that can play through remains to be seen. But the big difference is the Reserve Bank of Australia is on a loosening bias. It's cut its OCR. It's talking about cutting it further. And so the international money pressure is showing up in New Zealand.
We could learn from that, couldn't we?
We could. And I've been talking for some time about the potential for an OCR cut. I think it's going to happen in probably the next or the one after monetary policy statement by the Reserve Bank. I think they're going to be driven to it.
Interesting times, John. You keep in touch, please. He's retired now, but of course that means that he's busier than ever, as anyone who's retired will know. We've got more for you on the land straight after the break.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure. Manufactured from healthy deep-sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active Amino Acid Biostimulant. The way the world is growing. Working with nature. Good for the plant. Good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We'll get you thinking. Think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking. Think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking. Think water.
It's all looking good.
Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
Get you thinking. Think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz. Welcome back to On the Land. In just a moment we'll be talking about farm accounting. Making a big name for themselves, you look at IRD and Trade Me.
Yes, the IRD have come after Trade Me. They went to them and said, look, give us all the names of the people that are on there. Trade Me sort of tried to fight back a bit, but they've had to hand over 45,000 names basically to IRD, giving all their details, their personal details, their full transaction history, and basically every bit of information possible.
So that's going to get a whole lot of people from IRD pretty busy for the next couple of months.
It is, and it's because they've gone after those that are on there trading or sort of buying goods and then on selling them for a profit, and there's a lot of it going on. It's also, they're aware that there's people that are selling stuff on there that potentially aren't in their books anymore, and trying to make a bit of quick cash to put in their back pocket that IRD don't get any tax on.
So how does that work? You bring it down, you devalue it.
Yeah, well, basically, like, you've got some assets in your book. Let's say you've had them for 15 odd years. It's down to a couple of dollars in your financial statements. So you tell the accountant, look, just write it off. I don't have it anymore. And then, of course, we write it off. We don't think it exists, and they flick it on Trade Me and you know, put $1,000 or something like that on it, and hopefully sell it for that money, and we don't hear about it.
If somebody's been doing that, Kerry, are they able to come clean and ring IRD and say, well, ring you and say, listen, we better declare what I've been doing?
Definitely, yeah. They've got to go to IRD with a voluntary disclosure. There's a proper form to fill out. They're going to have to be upfront and honest as to why they've done it. They can't sort of say, oh, I forgot, because it's pretty obvious they're doing it. They're going to have to say, oh, they didn't realise it wasn't in the books or something, you know, come up with some feeble excuses, basically, is what they're going to be. And then you're at the mercy of IRD. They're going to come after them for penalties and interest.
But it's best to actually face them now rather than have IRD knocking on your door.
Yeah, you don't want them coming to you, because that's when they're going to come heavy-handed. They're going to say, look, you didn't pay the tax, we're going to charge the full amount of penalties. Whereas you're up front and do your voluntary disclosure, you can actually get a lower penalty rate, because they'll write some off, or they'll give you extra time to pay. There's a few ways to negotiate your way through it, but not if they come to you first. You've got very little left to argue with.
See your chartered accountant?
Definitely, yep. Go and talk to your accountant and tell them that you've been doing it, and sort of disclose all.
Over a period of time, you and I have discussed drought relief as far as IRD are concerned, and perhaps delaying provisionals. Is that we got through that for most of the country?
We're finding a lot of the dairy farmers we've been dealing with, they've been able to get through it. They're hanging in there. Their cash reserves are getting a bit low now, but they have been able to do, especially in the instalment arrangement with IRD, and say to them, look, you know, we've got like this tax due sort of around this time. They're saying, look, we can't afford to pay it all in full. Can we pay it off over 12 months? And IRD are pretty understanding. They'll work with you. They're not there to put you out of business. They know the dairy farmers are having a hard time.
Well, not just dairy farmers. There's a lot of
farmers, yes, yeah. But the dairy ones are the ones that's really focused on. And if you ring up and say, look, I want to pay it off, they say, yep, how much do you want to pay a month?
Or how much can you pay a month?
Yeah. Well, they don't even ask that. They just say, how much do you want to pay? And you tell them your figure. So instead of you having to sort of justify it, they're just going with that figure. So it's been pretty good of IRD, actually.
Does that mean that they don't add all the penalties and bits and pieces on?
They don't add the penalties, but they still charge you the interest.
Yeah, okay.
So at the moment, they've just announced the interest rate's going up to 9.21%. So it's fairly hefty, but it's cheaper than some of the overdraft rates out there that we've seen.
Yeah, okay. Now, IRD, bless their hearts, have been trying to simplify the tax system.
Yep, they've been working with the government, and the government's just come out with what they call a green paper, where they're trying to say, look, we want to bring the tax system into the 21st century. Here's some ideas we've got, and they've got some outstanding ideas. It's great. They're quite exciting, and they're wanting people to sort of get involved, comment, get feedback, and just generally try and help revamp the tax system, because it's been around for a long time, and they know it's hard for business in terms of costs.
It sort of sounds like the regional councils and the Resource Management Act, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. Except they're going to be more proactive in this one and get it right.
So, Kerry, basically, how do people get in touch with the possible changes or the ideas?
Well, the first step is this green paper has come out. If you haven't got a copy, get a copy of it, because it outlines things to especially provisional tax and PAYE. And so you can have a good read of that. They've got some questions in there, and then over the next sort of year and a half, something like that, they're going to start reducing a lot of discussion papers, and that's where they'll ask more detailed information, and you can make a formal submission as to what you think they should be doing. And it's your opportunity to get in there, because they want to hear from businesses and farmers, etc. out there, exactly what they're facing and what they want to see.
That's good, isn't it, that they're doing that?
Oh, it's great. It needed to be done. One of the big things I've realised that provisional tax is very, very hard on business. You know, 3 lump sums payments a year is just crippling for some. So they've come out and said, look, we want to revamp that whole thing, and here's an idea of what we've got. And then they want to see whether it's going to work for people and whether it's easy to manage.
I guess especially with new businesses, because you set up and then you've got the terminal tax, and at the end of that.
Yes, yeah. So your first year, you've got no cash going out for tax, and your second year you get hit hard with 2 years. With their proposed system, it would make it easier. You still got that sort of big hit coming, but it's spread out more, so you can sort of plan better for your cash flow.
Because that's what the average, I think there's about 80% of businesses get into major trouble in the first 5 years.
Yes, definitely, and tax is normally the first thing that gets them. After that, it's normally people not pricing right or something like that, but tax is normally the crippler.
Yeah, it is indeed. So what are they trying to do? Make it level for us people?
They're trying to make it easier for people to pay their tax. So one of the proposals, instead of paying it 3 times a year for your provisional tax, you pay it more regularly, so you pay it as you go sort of thing, like PAY effectively for permanent employees, except businesses will do that monthly. So you don't have to sort of save up and then suddenly all this cash goes out. You can say, right, over the next 12 months I'm going to have, say, $3,000 a month to pay, and you can budget accordingly.
Are they going to do something like a withholding for contractors?
That's still there, but they're looking at that system as well. At the moment, an employer has to go on the 20th of every month, pay it to IRD and file a whole pile of paperwork. They actually want to get to the point where you file it as you go. So every time you do pay for somebody, it effectively gets updated to IRD.
So yeah, I mean, it is quite revolutionary because we lead the world, I understand, in gathering it, but we're
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to cut down a whole pile of paperwork, which is what we want, but they are going to make you do it more computerised, which is not a bad thing.
Well,
that's where the world's heading, so if you're not there, you're going to find it hard.
Look at our program on the land. I mean, it's all tied up with websites and YouTubes and things that boys like me don't actually understand, but we don't need to.
No, exactly. So that's where they're heading, though. They want it all to be done through some sort of software provider. So you'll just do, process your pay, for example, click a button and IRD automatically gets the information.
I mean, it's like GST now. I mean, I don't think anybody does it with a cheque anymore.
We've probably got about 3 or 4% of our practice that do, but they're
3 or 4%.
But to be fair, they're sort of 70-odd years or older, and that's all they know is just cheques.
Yeah.
But most of them, it's all online now. That's the best way.
And so we're moving on, aren't we?
Yes.
And I guess that means that somebody like yourself can have clients all around the world.
Yeah, and we have. We've got them all around now. It means that there's no boundaries anymore. It does mean that IRD get a bit more coming in, of course, because they can spread their reach further. But there's nothing wrong with that.
No, because, every dollar that they gain from somebody else is a dollar that they don't have to worry about.
Exactly, yeah.
And as we've always said, don't mess with the IRD because they'll get you.
They always do in the end, yes. Yeah.
And do talk to your chartered accountant.
You need to, yeah. Get your account update on everything.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed. Kerry will be very regular here on the land. In fact, about every fortnight, giving you a bit of an insight as far as accounting is concerned, farm accounting, IRD, and things you can save money on and things you can benefit from and things you shouldn't really have an attempt at. Some excellent advice there from Kerry. Now, what makes somebody who has been a dairy farmer most of their life end up growing walnuts? Tell me about your change from dairying into trees.
Well, when we decided to go and do walnuts, it was on the basis that we could step away from it for a while and the livestock per se didn't mind. So we can go away for 3 months and the trees can live quite happily without us, and that's always good. But if anybody's thinking of going into walnuts, you need to be in it for the long haul. It takes a while. We bought this property in 1996. We started planting in 98, 2000. Firstly, we planted shelter and then we planted walnut trees. We're now in year 18. If I hadn't made a big investment in machinery this year, we would have broken even for the first time. But in saying that, the forecast is still looking very good. At the moment, it's exciting times because the walnut growers are getting together and we're looking at forming a company to take over the local processing at West Melton, who are looking to retire from the business. They've been marvellous servants of the industry, and so it's now up to growers to pick up the ball and run with it, really. Demand in New Zealand is an interesting one. We have not got enough New Zealand supply to meet New Zealand demand. We're currently importing around 600 tonnes a year, but in saying that, local supply will grow quite quickly over the next 4 to 5 years. We're at the stage now where the orchards are just starting to come in. There was a number of orchards that were planted about the time we started, which was back in 2000, and those orchards are starting to come on stream now, and sometimes their production is getting anything up to 300% increases year on year. So you look at the trees, you haven't got a clue what's coming, but what I do know is I believe it's going to be bigger than last year. We've got 4 varieties planted here. We've got the standard one, most prolific is Rex. Mayrick is another one that's a very popular nut because it has a softer shell. You can crack it by hand, just squeeze it in your fingers. And we've also got 2 other varieties, 157 and Sahama, because they're a slightly bigger nut, and as a table nut they're really, really nice. But New Zealand's nuts have a unique flavour, and it's believed that the flavour of New Zealand nuts is because of our slightly cooler climate and the ground conditions that we have here. So our nuts tend to have a soft, nutty flavour, whereas if you buy American nuts, for example, like Chandler, to us they're tasteless, they're very bland. And if you buy the European nuts, like Franquetta or those ones, I find them very harsh. So every time I see people and they try the nuts we have, they turn around and ask me, where can I buy these nuts? So it's a good indication.
And where can they?
Well, at the moment, there are some outlets in town that stock the nuts from a crack of a nut. Ballantyne's is one, and a few of the specialist shops have got them. And restaurants buy them because they're looking for high quality food, and we're struggling to meet current demand. So we're looking forward to increasing supply so that we can actually service that demand. All of our trees are grafted trees. So the signwood's been taken off the individual tree that is the mother tree for these ones, and that's how we get our specific varieties.
So there's wee cunning move there.
Well, not necessarily. Lincoln University, around about 25 years ago now, sent out for walnuts around the country and asked people to send in samples of the nuts that they had in their backyard. And they checked those for things like shell seal, because that'll tell you how long you can keep nuts before they go rancid, and flavour, and the ratio of kernel to shell. And they came up with a few varieties which were then put into a trial at Lincoln University, and they ran those for about 14 years to gather how much information they could with regard to yield and the consistency of the traits that we were looking for. And they came up with two recommendations, which was Rex and Mayrick. Rex is named after Dr. Rex Baker, who was involved in the early trials. I'm not quite sure where Mayrick got its name from. But the other ones had the generic numbers of 157 or 128 or whatever. They were numbered just in the trial. And Tahama's is a standard breed that's been around for a while. It's actually in the States and a few other places. But so having had those trees, Rex came from a backyard tree in Shirley here in Christchurch. So all of the Rex trees here, which number some thousands now, have been generated from that one tree.
After the break, there's some very scary new regulations as far as OSHA are concerned, so you better catch those.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good.
Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
Welcome back to On the Land. There's some very new regulations which are scaring the living daylights out of a whole lot of people, and it's all about responsibility if something happens on your farm.
Yeah, Rob, they have been, and we've seen quite a proliferation of new inquiries from the farm, from dairy and our dry stock farmers coming in and wanting to get some information on just how these new rules are going to affect them, and probably more importantly, how can they put radio onto the farm to make things better for them in the unlikely event of something happening on the farm. Yeah.
Tell us exactly what it is that's caused the problem.
There's been a spate, as you well know, of accidents over the years, and the cost has been quite substantial to the taxpayer and ACC payments, and cost to farmers and owners, time off the farm with workers and so on. And of course the worst case scenario, we lose farmers. We're losing a farmer every 3 weeks in New Zealand, and we've had over 100,000 claims to ACC for farm injury, on-farm injury and logging and so on. So it's fair to say that we're in a high risk category, and we can help mitigate those risks by putting good quality communications on the farm, but also make the farm more efficient. We're very much focused on making the farmer more money and helping to alleviate costs.
The cost through the courts, if you are found negligent?
Negligent, yeah. Well, look, we just finished, as you were there at the field days, a fantastic event we had. We had a health and safety, independent health and safety advisor in our stand. Some of the numbers were just absolutely mind-blowing, but if you take the extreme or the higher sort of level, we're talking $3 million basically to potential fine to a business, to a company. Farm, doesn't matter if it's a farm or contractor. Some of the fines are around the $100,000 mark, just for failing to provide the right safety gear to your employees in the natural course of your business as a farmer.
So that's things like helmets and ear protection, but also communication.
Absolutely. Look, if you've got a guy out on the back of the farm and you can't talk to him, that's a scary proposition. We've got to know where all of our guys are on the property, for safety and just for efficiency. If we don't want to be driving all over the farm looking for the Waratah rammer when we can get it delivered to us by someone else. But the farm safety side is extremely important. We're seeing a massive proliferation in on-farm accidents, and a lot of those can be averted or the effects of that mitigated by simply just having good communications on the farm. It's as simple as that, and that's what we do at Te Parker.
Because that's actually the crux of it in so many cases. I mean, this new OSH, the rules and regulations, the $3 million through the courts, that's the fine, that's not retribution.
No, that's the fine. So they've changed the way that the complaints are dealt with, or the offences, as they call them now, are dealt with. So the action's now taken through the district court, which means that the farmer has to, or the employer, the owner of the business has to employ a lawyer and defend himself or the business itself against a prosecution by WorkSafe or whatever the case may be. So it's got it's got more efficient on one hand, but it's got very scary on the other for business owners. The responsibility level's gone, I suppose, similar to what's happened in the logging industry, where they've had to really take a good hard look at themselves as far as what they do and how they provide what they provide to their workers and to their team.
And it's not the hurt person who does the prosecution. They don't have to make a complaint. The department does. That's
right. So basically, the worker, if the worker's injured through and there's negligence on behalf of the owner or the manager, because now the manager is equally as liable. So, for example, you're a milking manager, you're a farm manager, contract milker, whatever the case may be, you're as liable as the owner. So, in the past it was all sort of dealt through ACC and so on, but that's changed, and that's something that we're spending a lot of time trying to help farmers, mitigate those effects. And I know WorkSafe, we've had good talks with those guys over the last few months, and they are in total agreement with us that if we can provide the means to give farmers and workers the opportunity to communicate in a good way, they're going to look more favourably on an incident should it happen.
some of the new gear it even knocks out the background noise.
Yeah, we had a great example of that at the field days. We had the new wireless device which Motorola released just a few months ago. Now that basically gives the farmer the ability to walk away from the vehicle with his 15-20 watt unit in the vehicle, walk away up to 100 metres, fix a fence, check the irrigation, free some stock that might be caught up, or whatever the case may be, and still maintain contact with that powerful mobile unit that's in the tractor or the truck, and back to the base or the other workers. So should something happen, say he's away from the vehicle, and we had a farmer just the other day come in, it slipped over and busted his leg and hurt his back. Now the radio, perfect. He was able to call back and get some assistance. So it makes a hell of a difference. The other thing that this new device is great at is it suppresses background noise. So if you're working next to a guy with a chainsaw or an angle grinder or in the milking shed or a tractor or harvester, whatever the case may be, this device suppresses all that noise so you can still communicate very effectively. It's a great wee device.
Technology just doesn't stop advancing, does it? In just a moment, we'll be talking things funeral. Roddy, looming minefield as far as immigrants coming over to work here, and if something serious happens.
Yes, I wouldn't like to think of immigrants as, shall we say, a minefield, given that my wife is one. But,
but the pros and cons if something happens,
yes.
There is.
Yeah, jokes aside, there is pros and cons, and I think my wife's a really good example, actually. She's Canadian, and all her family and their entirety are in the middle of nowhere. I think they call it Alberta.
You're in trouble when you get home.
Exactly. No, she's from a farming family in Alberta,
yep.
And they have a local cemetery a couple of kilometres down the road where you can see every generation that's ever farmed there, going back four to five generations. And so for her, she'll be the first time that one of her family members is likely to die overseas, all other things being equal, and that is going to raise a couple of challenges probably for our children, hopefully not for me, because I'm preferred I'd go first. Let her worry about it. But there's all sorts of issues regarding does the body be repatriated? Do you have a funeral here in this country and then another one in the country of birth? Is there a celebration here and then a memorial service over there? All of these things have legal and financial implications. And so bring it more relevant to perhaps the audience who are not in my situation but are hiring folks from overseas, whether they be migrant workers under the government schemes, whether they be people from Pacific Islands, where they come from the Philippines, working in the dairy industry. They have got some serious concerns because often folks overseas have very specific funeral rites that need to be dealt with. And I've recently, in the last sort of 2 weeks, we've had 3 what I would consider outside ethnic funerals, as in they were funerals that had huge influence from the folks overseas, and they were very, very expensive. There was a lot of hoops to jump through, and in one particular case we had some serious hoops regarding documentation that the home country required, proof that our documents were real, proof that the person had died, all these sorts of implications.
It's not just a doctor's certificate like we have for locals.
No, I fell into the unusual situation where we had a death certificate produced by Burst Deaths and Marriages out of Wellington, and the embassy turned around and said, prove that it's real. And I was like, oh, okay.
It's got the official stamp on it.
Exactly. But supposedly there is a department of authentication that didn't know about this, and you can pay a sum of money to get special seals and stamps put on it. But that was part of the process that needed to be dealt with, and once we're aware of it, it's fairly smooth. But at the same time, being aware of these things, and particularly if you're the only person in contact, for example, if you have a dairy worker that's come from, say, I don't know, Sri Lanka, and you are expected to do all of the paperwork on their behalf. They have no family here, you're the liaison. The family in Sri Lanka is expecting to see either the deceased person come home or their ashes come home, and they don't have the financial capability to do it themselves. Where the responsibility legally starts and ends is an interesting question, and also the moral responsibility that you've taken this person into your care, and once they've passed away, that care doesn't end. And so there are those things that need to be dealt with quite carefully. And we talked a few months ago about this and how that it would behoove a lot of employers to invest in a small life insurance policy with at least the amount that would cover these sorts of things. And so we encourage people to come and have a talk to us, and we can give them the sort of the worst case scenarios and say, well, if you have to do this based on where that person's from, this is what it's going to cost. Here are the legal hoops that you'll need to jump through. Here's what we can do to help. Here's what you'll need to do on your own, and here's what the bill will be from all ends of it. And that can be quite useful because it might not be a big sum. You know, it might be somewhere around the $15,000 to $20,000 will get the job done.
Yeah, but $15,000 to $20,000 you haven't budgeted for, Roddy.
That's true if you've got to pay it in cash, but if you've got a policy that might only be a few dollars a month, you know, it might be $20 or $30 a month for a life insurance policy to cover that. So it becomes a question of doing simple math. It might be more than that. You know, you might have a person who's at risk and all those sorts of things. So have you got medical records? Are you going to be on the hook if someone gets seriously ill? They don't die, but they've still got to go home to their home country and they have no money to do it.
Burst appendicitis, or God knows what could happen, isn't it?
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of what-if scenarios out there that are going to happen more and more often because we have got a growing immigrant population. They come from all over the world. English is often not their first language, and particularly the people who are back home don't have English. They don't have any understanding of our culture, of our rules. They don't understand why they can't do this, that, and the next thing. And we have no ability to talk to them to explain it. And to be honest, embassies can be as useless. Well, exactly.
I was just going to say the other problem is that there's probably rules whether that person can be cremated or left as in a tin lined coffin.
Well, I'll give you an example. I had a family, this is very recently, a family, they decided to leave the person here in Christchurch, bury them in Christchurch Cemetery. Mother was agreed, however, family members back in Asia want the body back there. It's all to do with a family shrine, I guess, that they need to be interred in. And the funeral account was paid, and then 2 days later I got a call from the person that just done a full funeral for a full burial saying how much to dig the person back up and shift them to China. The question that they hadn't realised is that all of a sudden we're not dealing with a clean scenario anymore. The person has been interred in New Zealand soil, so you've got biosecurity for China, you've got biosecurity for New Zealand. It just, the can of worms just got really, really large. It was a garbage can of worms. And it was something that we had to work through. At this stage we've convinced them, and the cost would have been nearly double of what the original funeral cost. And so this was on top of it. And these are the situations, and particularly with China, you've often got one child because of the one-child rule. You've got two parents, so you've got one child who's got to fund all of this. It's not like there's a family to have a whip around, but you've got uncles and aunties who play a very heavy cultural card, respecting your elders, etc., putting massive pressure on this person who is dealing with a death in a foreign country of a parent who's been out here, and they're grieving, and they've got all these things thrown at them. So.
And the language barriers.
Yeah, that was challenging in of itself. How do you explain the concept of a grave to somebody who doesn't understand the word grave or cemetery or burial or any of the words we use to elucidate what the problem would be? So the issue for us was, what do they actually need? What is the law? And what's the best we can do for them so that they're not going to have problems either financially, legally, or shall we say, morally / religious issues back home. And so these are the things that we sort of bring together and try and give people advice in advance. And it sounds a little morbid, but at the end of the day, this is going to happen to everybody. All right. So it should be a conversation we have. It should be a conversation that New Zealanders have with themselves. Okay, you've got a son and a daughter. Like, I've got 3 sisters. All of them are working in Australia. One in Perth, one in Townsville, one in Alice Springs. They've picked, the most remote spots they can get to.
Who are they getting away from, Roddy?
It's an exceedingly a good question. Don't think it's me. I hope it's not me. But the point I'm making is that they alone have all indicated they want to come back to New Zealand. Well, there's a cost associated with that. Throw into the fact that Australia only embalms 30% of the time.
And that heat?
And believe it or not, they have what they call the Kelvinator method. Essentially, they refrigerate. So there's also, and that's just between two countries who are almost identical in terms of culture in many respects, and yet in their funerary practices, they're distinctly different from us. And so you've got all of these things, because it's just a lack of skill set. You could be in the middle of a town, Alice Springs, and the funeral director there has never done a repatriation embalm in his life. Ooh. What do you do? So these are the conversations that need to be had.
Roddy, thank you very much indeed. So very, very complicated indeed. But if you do want to catch up on what he said, or just double check on something that he said, don't forget you can get onto our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. So I guess it's the case if you've either been watching or you've just missed On the Land, but you can catch up on it as far as the website is concerned. I'll be back at the same time next week, though, with another On the Land. Until then, bye now.